So, I've decided to finally do a series of videos where I rank the best picture winners. I have no idea when this series will finish, or when the subsequent videos will be out, but I'm going to try and get through them all, and edit my thoughts. So, as mentioned in the title, this is my ranking of the best picture winners of the 1990s, and whether or not I believe they deserve to win. I'm not completely sure what decade I'll do after this one, but I'm saving the 2020s for last, just in case it takes ages to finish. Something I will clarify in advance is that I've not seen all of the best picture nominees of the 1990s, and this will probably end up being the case with all decades. This is just a ranking of the winners. So when I say whether or not I believe it deserved to win, I'm mostly going off what I've seen of movies from each year. I'm going to quickly leave a list of all the 1990s nominees I have not seen. So, with this out of the way, let's get started. Unforgiven is boring. There's honestly so little to talk about with this movie. Visually it looks good, and the cast are fine, but all this is wasted on such a tedious script, with excessive boring conversations that not even Morgan Freeman's iconic voice can save. The music is occasionally nice to listen to. There's a point in the last 20 minutes where we get an interesting action scene, but it only lasts 2 minutes, and we then cut back to more boring dialogue. And the climax is so anticlimactic. Clint Eastwood's character just stands there and shoots at his opponents, but he doesn't get shot a single time. He doesn't even move from his position. Are you really telling me that not one person is able to strike him? Are you serious? That's literally all I have to say. Howard's End is the only 1992 nominee I've seen, and it's way better than this snooze fest. But of the movies I've seen from 1992, I would have given it to Reservoir Dogs, one of Tarantino's best movies, and a genuinely intriguing movie that I would add to the list of movies that use the non-linear narrative correctly. Moving on. Dances with Wolves is honestly not much better. Just like Unforgiven, it is really boring to watch. And I was kind of on the fence about putting it higher than that movie, due to its absurdly long runtime. The movie is almost 4 hours long, and it is extremely slow-paced. I barely remember anything that happens in the movie. I don't think I remember anything from the first hour, other than the character Major Farnborough killing himself. And yes, I had to look up his name because I forgot it. Kevin Costner narrates quite a lot. Although his diary does sort of play into the third act, it doesn't change the fact that he delivers it like cardboard. I think the only reason I consider this a slight step up from Unforgiven is that the score is genuinely amazing, and does slightly elevate some otherwise very tedious scenes. And there is some pretty good cinematography as well. But this unfortunately is not enough to save the movie. Many people say that Goodfellas should have won Best Picture, and of the movies I've seen from 1990, I would agree. It's definitely miles better than this snooze fest. Wow. So of these 10 Best Picture winners, there's only 2 I consider bad, and the next quote-unquote worst movie is actually quite good. So, what have we got next? It's almost universally agreed that Saving Private Ryan deserved Best Picture over this movie, and although I would say Saving Private Ryan was definitely a better movie, by a landslide, I personally would have given the award to the unnominated Prince of Egypt, which remains my favourite animated DreamWorks movie. A lot of people remember Shakespeare in Love as the movie that beat Saving Private Ryan, but that doesn't make it a bad movie. I personally think it's on the borderline between being average and being good, but leaning slightly more to the good side. Shakespeare in Love is a well-made movie. Though I do find some of the side characters a bit one-dimensional, the actors mostly do a good job, particularly Joseph Fiennes, Gwyneth Paltrow, Geoffrey Rush, Ben Affleck and Judi Dench. The only one I'm not so big on is Colin Firth. He feels very miscast in the role, and the character is very one-dimensional. Plus, I'm not a fan of his facial hair or those weird dangly earrings. But in spite of that, the film does mostly look good visually, and the score genuinely slaps. The script itself I'm not particularly big on. It doesn't really feel like anything new, just a fictional account of how William Shakespeare wrote Romeo and Juliet. And I'm not saying movies about the making of a famous film or play can't have intriguing scripts. Hell, I think George Lucas in Love, which is a parody of this movie, is really bloody good. But I just don't feel like Shakespeare in Love does anything particularly new or interesting with the idea. It's a decent script, but not much more. So while I do find it really overrated, and definitely not worthy of its Best Picture win, it's still a good movie overall. The English Patient is great. For the last 60 minutes. Before that, it's a passable and well-made movie, but not much more. The performances from Ralph Fiennes, Juliette Binoche and Willem Dafoe are fantastic all the way through. They show a lot of commitment to their respective roles, with Dafoe's best acting in the movie being in the scene where he's being tortured for information and sounds genuinely terrified. Another great aspect of the movie all the way through is Gabriel Yared's musical score. It's absolutely gorgeous to listen to, and one of the scenes it really elevates is the scene in which Hannah flies through the cave of swimmers on a rope held by Kip. And the last 60 minutes of the movie is honestly where the movie starts to pick up, and I become intrigued in where the movie goes from here, including the two scenes I mentioned. Before that, it's okay. The rest of the performances and story are fine, but unfortunately, the only possible 100 minutes do bring down the movie. Though it's definitely not as boring as Unforgiven for how tedious it is, or Actual Dancers would be more entertaining than Dances with Wolves. It's a good movie, brought down by its first 100 minutes and elevated by the last 60, but it's not Best Picture material by a long shot. Of the 3 nominees I've seen from that year, it's better than Jerry Maguire, but it doesn't hold a candle to Fargo. But my personal choice of the movies I've seen from 1996 would be the unnominated Breaking the Waves. It's a brilliant movie with a fantastic performance from Emily Watson. And that's Emily Watson, not Emma Watson. Braveheart is a movie where everyone makes fun of the historical inaccuracies. But unlike a movie like Pocahontas, I don't find them particularly distasteful. In addition to this, I don't think Mel Gibson's goal with Braveheart was to tell an accurate account of William Wallace's life. His goal was to make us care about him, and for me personally, it succeeded. While I don't believe that a film or show achieving its goal single-handedly makes it good, I do consider Braveheart a great movie overall. Although Mel Gibson's Scottish accent isn't great, I do think his performance overall is very committed, and he really shows William Wallace's determination to maintain his freedom, even if it costs him his life. But where Gibson's contributions to the movie really shine is in his direction. The way the film is directed, especially the action scenes, is amazing. And while I do think Toy Story was the best film I've seen from 1995 and should have won Best Picture, Gibson did deserve Best Director for the movie. Say what you will about Mel Gibson, but how did South Park put it?
Say what you want about Mel Gibson, but the son of a bitch knows story structure.
That's the one. And the music is amazing. It suits the Scottish setting of the movie and makes the atmosphere feel a lot bigger, as does the cinematography. Braveheart is an intriguing, very well made movie, and although as mentioned earlier I wouldn't have given it Best Picture, it is still one of my favourite movies from 1995. Forrest Gump is a great movie. The writing, the direction, the acting, the cinematography, the music, the effects, all brilliant. One thing that Forrest Gump is considered particularly groundbreaking for is its effects. There's the clear, but also highly impressive use where Tom Hanks is in pre-existing footage with real celebrities like John F. Kennedy and John Lennon, but there's also a lot of less clear uses. Fame Focus did a really good video going into depth on all the VFX used for the film, and the fact that a lot of this had to be pointed out shows just how amazing the effects really are, especially for 1994. A lot of people say that they don't like Jenny due to her continually leaving and then coming back to Forrest, but I don't see her as using him. Jenny, along with her sisters, was sexually abused by her father as a child, and she felt her only way of escape was to run. While Forrest is very committed to her, she believes that staying with him could potentially hurt him, and it's clear that whenever she reunites with him, she wants what's best for him, and her leaving him is done reluctantly. You feel bad for Forrest, but you also understand Jenny's reasons for doing it, as well as her reluctance in doing so. While I don't think Forrest Gump merited the Best Picture award, which I would have given to Pulp Fiction, it does have a specific scene, which I would say was almost on par with the best scenes in that film, and also The Shawshank Redemption. And that scene is when Forrest learns of his son's existence. It's such a poignant moment, especially when Forrest asks if his son is smart or like him. It's a moment where you realise that Forrest has always been aware of his condition, but never really cared until he thought it might affect someone else. Not only does it single-handedly bring even more merit to the film's message, but it's also acted brilliantly by Tom Hanks, who I think deserved to win Best Actor. But the film's message is amazing. The film is all about how you can achieve amazing things regardless of whether you have conditions or not. Forrest had a below-average IQ, and during his early childhood leg braces, but it didn't stop him from contributing to so many historical events and living an eventful life. Forrest Gump may not be the Best Picture winner of the 90s, or even the best movie of 1984, but it's still a very poignant and well-made movie. Though it has caused understandable controversy due to transphobic undertones, and ones that I, as a non-binary person, am on the fence about considering a product of the time, or bad even for 1991, The Silence of the Lambs is overall a great movie. The best thing about the movie for me is Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter. He really warranted his Oscar for this movie, really presenting such a creepy nature to the character, and it's especially eerie when he stares into the camera. And Hannibal in general is a great villain, and his way of escaping prison is highly disturbing, but also highly creative. And Jodie Foster is great as Clarice as well. The way Clarice collects information on tracking down Buffalo Bill is very interesting, and Buffalo's plan is creative, despite the previously mentioned problematic connotation it sends. While I would say Beauty and the Beast was a better movie, and the best movie of 1991, of the movies I have seen from that year, I do still think The Silence of the Lambs is a great movie, featuring a lot of eerie suspense and creativity, and extremely committed performances from Jodie Foster, and most especially, Anthony Hopkins. Titanic is such a huge achievement in filmmaking. The direction, the visual style, the cinematography, the score, and my god, the transitions between past and present are fire. I hear a lot of people say they find the movie boring and too long, and that it takes until the second half to properly get invested, but I disagree. I like the way the movie is built up, and I think the romance between Jack and Rose is really intriguing. I really ship the two, and I love how devoted they become to each other when helping each other escape the sinking ship in the climax, which makes Jack's death a lot sadder. And on that topic, the high suspense when the ship approaches the iceberg, continuing with the depiction of the sinking of the Titanic, is extremely well done. This is where a lot of the already amazing technical aspects really reach their peak. The film very seamlessly flows from a romance story to a disaster story, but it still manages to tell a coherent story and keep the romance between Jack and Rose in focus. In terms of flaws, I can't think of any major ones. A problem I do have with the film is the uselessness of Jack's friend Fabrizio to the story. He only really appears in the first act, and then some of the third act, and nothing he really does impacts the story that much. But at the same time, he's not a major character, so it's not a major flaw. On the topic of scene removals and things that should have been removed, I've seen a deleted scene in which Jack and Rose kiss in the boiler room, and I can't tell which is steamier, the boiler room or the kiss. While I wouldn't call Titanic the best Picture winner of the 90s, I would call it the most impressive Best Picture winner of the 90s, and very deserving of all the awards it won, and the billions it made worldwide. I just hope they won't release it on Disney Plus and edit it so Jack won't draw Rose like one of his French girls. Upon rewatching American Beauty, most of my opinion from my 2020 Best Movies video has remained the same, but I think I've come to appreciate the themes and humour a bit more. Although the movie has become more polarising than when it first came out, and due to Kevin Spacey has made it harder to watch for a lot of people, I still think a lot of it holds up today, particularly in its themes of sexuality, materialism, and different kinds of love. Many people would say this film's plot and or script were hard to explain without the film coming off as weird, and I can definitely understand why. But I personally do not see the film as glorifying Lester's legal attraction to Angela, especially when Lester realises Angela pretending to have lots of sexual experience was a veil for her innocence, and that it would be wrong for him to go through with having sex with her, now finally seeing her as a person and not as a sexual object. I would also potentially consider this movie a perfect dramedy. There's a lot of funny moments and dialogue in the movie, but also a rich sense of drama and seriousness to it, and both flow pretty seamlessly among each other. And it maintains the great writing, acting, direction, cinematography, and use of red that I praised previously. And I should also give mention to the amazing score from Thomas Newman. MacLeod still remains one of my favourite movies, but I still think American Beauty is a smidge higher, and deserved the Best Picture Oscar. A phenomenal movie from a phenomenal year for movies in general. I watched Schindler's List for the first time as a teen, and I loved it then, but revisiting it now, I love it even more. Schindler's List is one of my favourite films of all time, and one of the most emotionally powerful films I've ever seen. It treats its themes with dignity, and is very respectful of the victims and survivors of the Holocaust. And the music by John Williams is very sad, but also beautifully composed. The performances are also amazing. While I would say that Tom Hanks deserved Best Actor for Philadelphia, I would say that Liam Neeson's performance as Schindler comes a close second. Neeson plays the role brilliantly, and really shows the journey Schindler went on during the Holocaust. From his focus changing from making money to saving as many Jews as possible, even when it meant losing money. And that ending scene where Schindler breaks down crying and believing he could have done more before being comforted by the workers is so emotionally powerful. Ralph Fiennes is also fantastic as Amon Goth, representing him as the evil, sadistic, and detestable man he really was. But what makes Schindler's List such a brilliant movie is its message. The extremely important and inspiring message about how even one person can make a huge difference. Even in barbaric situations where people will inevitably become victims, you can make a difference. Even making the smallest difference is better than making no difference. And if you've tried to reduce the number of victims and or deaths, you shouldn't feel remorse for not being able to do more, but instead be proud of the positive differences you made. Steven Spielberg is a great filmmaker, and although I haven't seen all his movies, of the ones I've seen, Schindler's List is easily the best one, and absolutely deserved to win Best Picture.